My name is Roberta Iannacito Provenzano, and I'm the Provost and Vice President Academic at Toronto Metropolitan University. I'm pleased to welcome you to our Democracy Forum. Before we get started, I would like to acknowledge the history of the land we are on. This acknowledgement is a place to begin our thinking about truth and reconciliation, and I encourage everyone to consider their relationship to the land and Indigenous peoples. Toronto is in the Dish with One Spoon territory. The Dish with One Spoon is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. Subsequent Indigenous nations and peoples, Europeans, and all newcomers have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. Thank you for being here. As many of you know, the Democracy Forum is a nonpartisan platform for politicians and practitioners to engage in dialogue and increase democratic engagement. Over the years, we've hosted Premier Doug Ford and his progressive conservative cabinet ministers, as well as leaders and MPPs from the NDP and Liberal and Green parties to discuss public policy and politics. Today, we're pleased to welcome the 5 declared candidates for the Ontario Liberal Party leadership. This is an important opportunity to celebrate democracy on our beautiful campus and on a gorgeous day by hearing the perspectives and priorities of these candidates on the major issues. Fora like these are essential to the democratic process. They not only inform the voting public, but promote accountability, tolerance, and constructive dialogue. As an institution, TMU believes in fostering dialogue and debate, as our teaching, learning, and research are driven by the diversity of ideas and experiences of our community. Today's debate will be moderated by Martin Reg Kahn, a political columnist at the Toronto Star covering Queen's Park. Founder of the Democracy Forum at Toronto Metropolitan University, Martin is a senior fellow at the Dais on campus and a senior fellow at the Monk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy at the University of Toronto. He was a foreign correspondent for 11 years in Asia and the Middle East, and also a parliamentary correspondent. I'm going to pass the mic over to Martin to get things started. Thank you so much.
Thank you, bienvenue, bonjour. Welcome to our 28th Democracy Forum at Toronto Metropolitan University, where we try to do democracy differently and more democratically. If you're watching on thestar.com or on TV via the CPAC television network, thanks for joining us. So we've invited all 5 candidates for the Liberal leadership to have their first public debate in Toronto here at TMU. Now, our Democracy Forum, as Roberta just said, is nonpartisan, but this debate is inspired by our first Democracy Forum about more than 5 years ago, when we had the Premier of the day and the opposition leaders debating democratic engagement together on stage for the first time. And that was part of our mission then and very much at our core today. Now today, we're asking these candidates to debate their visions for the future of Ontario, but also to sell us on why they may be best able to take on Doug Ford on behalf of their party, which is not as easy as it sounds. We've had the Premier, as Roberta said, on our Democracy Forum. We had the previous Liberal leader, previous NDP leader, and as guests as well, and the record will show that Mr. Ford defeated them easily in the last 2 elections. So your work is cut out for you. No pressure. All right, some quick housekeeping before we get to the questions. I'm going to ask everyone to please not interrupt the debate. People are here to hear them and not you. And please hold your applause, except at the very beginning and the very end of the debate when I give you the signal. One quick other housekeeping note, if you want to vote in this leadership race, if the Liberal Party, Liberal candidates have inspired you, unless you're a student, it's too late. If you're a student, because the deadline was September 11th, if you're a student, you get an extension, right? I mean, students always get extensions at TMU, at Toronto Met, and every campus. So as I understand it, it's in the, I didn't arrange this, but it's in the Liberal Party constitution. Somebody had the foresight years ago. You have, I think, until next Tuesday, the 26th, to join a campus club, any college or university. So that means these guys have an extra incentive to try to win you over today. No pressure. One other rule, sorry, that is the only other rule. So here's the signal. This is not a drill. Please welcome all these candidates to our Democracy Forum. Let me tell you about our guests, because they all have great life stories. I'm going to start from your left. Bonnie Crombie is mayor of Mississauga, a former city councillor. She was MP for Mississauga-Streetsville and a public affairs consultant. She holds an MBA from the Schulich School of Business and a BA in political science and international studies from U of T. Nate Erskine-Smith is the MP for Beaches York, a commercial litigator. He studied law at Queen's and received his Master's of Laws from Oxford. You notice in these bios I like to stress the education because we're an educational institution here. Ted Hsu is the MPP for Kingston and the Islands, a former MP. He previously worked in finance. He has a PhD in physics from Princeton University and a BSc from Queen's. Yasser Naqvi is the MP for Ottawa Centre, a former Ontario cabinet minister and trade lawyer. He studied at the University of Ottawa Law School and holds a master's in political science from Carleton. He has a BA in political science and a BSc in life sciences from McMaster. Adil Shamji is the MPP for Don Valley East, an emergency room doctor. He studied at U of T Medical School. He holds a master's in public policy from Oxford and a Bachelor of Medical Sciences from Western. So they're all arranged in alphabetical order. I'll be calling them in that sequence, but by surnames, and then I'll go to first names and then back and forth just to mix things up, in case you're wondering. So let's get started. For the first round, I'm opening with an icebreaker, just to kind of warm them up. Very quick question for me, and a rapid 20-second response from all of them. No follow-up. Question is, trick question, I guess, but you'd be surprised how the answers can vary. Tell us why you want to be leader and premier. 20 seconds, Ms. Crombie.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. Ane Bojo, I am honored to be here with my esteemed colleagues. I'm so blessed that we have such 5 great candidates in this race, and there is an interest in leading the great Liberal Party of Ontario. I want to be premier because I want to change the direction, the course of direction that this province is on. It's harmful, it's wrong, and it's dangerous.
Mr. Erskine-Smith. Please, let's avoid competing applause. All right, Mr. Erskine-Smith.
I left law for federal politics 10 years ago because our Liberal Party was in 3rd place. We were really frustrating conservative majority government, and we'd gone through 2 really tough elections. And that's where I could make the biggest difference. Well, that's exactly where we are at the provincial level right now. We deserve better. If you want better, you participate. And I want better, and this is where I can make the biggest difference, delivering smart, fair, and honest government for the province of Ontario.
Okay, Mr. Hsu. And in fairness to all the candidates, forgive me, I should have pointed you, that is our mighty timekeeper right in front with the yellow card and the red card. So try not to get carded, folks. Okay, Mr. Hsu.
I want to be able to tell everybody in the province and their kids, their families, I'm for you. The Liberal Party is for you. We want to make sure everybody has a roof over their head, enough money to buy groceries, and some left over for a rainy day. I've got a lot of experience that I want to put to use, and I hear in my job as MPP all the problems that people are having. I want to make sure that the Ontario Liberal Party and the Liberal government.
Mr. Naqvi.
My mission is to defeat Doug Ford in 2026, to lead a practical, principled, Liberal government that works for every single Ontarian, not just for the rich buddies of Doug Ford. Thank you.
Right.
Please, no applause. Don't force me to be the tough guy. Okay, Dr. Shamji.
Politicians see the world from 30,000 feet. For over 10 years, I've worked in Toronto, rural and remote Ontario, First Nations communities, the Arctic. I've run homeless shelters, and I've confronted the challenges that Ontarians and Canadians are facing eye to eye. I want to bring a conception of selfless leadership and make this province as bright, happy, and prosperous as it can.
That's time's up. Okay, this was kind of a practice round to get everyone used to the idea of not running out of time. Thank you, everyone. All right, so now we're going to go to in-depth questions after we've narrowed down the themes based on a lot of the questions that we got from the audience. So thank you for all the questions that we received. So let's focus on the time now. We'll have a 1-minute response from each candidate, followed by 2 minutes of open debate, all right? So watch our timekeeper. The yellow card will come up at 15 seconds. The red card means time's up. It's like soccer. Try not to get carded. Okay, our first main theme is housing and the unhoused. In the words of one audience member, I am currently a 20-year-old university student. Will I ever be able to own my own home in the future? The question to all of you is, what do you say to students and even young professors who can't find a place to live, either owning or renting? What's causing the problem, and what's your solution? We're going to go in reverse order, so Dr. Shamji, you're first.
What I want to tell to all of those students, those newly employed individuals, is that there is hope, but that hope takes ambition, not personal ambition, but ambition for everyone across this province. It's going to focus on at least 4 things. Number 1, increasing density in our supply of housing across the province, but not just any kind of housing, the kind that matters. We need to have affordable housing and supportive housing, and we need to find and work with all the partners who can help us, not just municipal and nonprofit partners, but private sector partners as well. We need to revive the hope of renting again. 90% of our apartments, of our rental apartments, were created before 1990. We need more of that. We need rental stock. We need a definition of affordability that actually makes sense, that is tied to our average gross household income. And finally, we need to create hope for a home for all of us again. And that includes innovative models like shared equity mortgages. That includes co-ownership of homes. And where necessary, asking the government to step in with incentive
Time's up.
planning,
All right.
financing, and building homes.
Thank you, Dr. Shamji. Watch that clock, everyone. Mr. Nakvi, you're next.
Absolutely. Everybody should be able to afford a home, either as their own or to rent. And for the government has a very important role in that, and that role is working in partnership. No one level of government can solve this problem. All 3 orders of government, along with private sector and not-for-profit housing providers, has an important role in that. And I put together a very extensive plan in that regards that you can see on my website, where we can really bring the cost of building of housing down, that savings up to an average of $135,000 can be passed on to you, the home buyer or home renter, but also then using that money as an incentive to get best outcomes from municipalities who should allow for these housings to build, not to mention leveraging provincial land so that we can build more affordable social housing for those who are marginalized, so we can put an end to chronic homelessness in our province. Thank you.
Mr. Hsu.
I've been hearing this fall about students who've come to Ontario who don't have a place to live at the beginning of term. So it's not just about finding housing later, it's about finding housing now. But I want to tell those students and everybody else who's having trouble finding housing, there's political will out there to build housing. Because if you talk to economic development people, if you talk to businesses, when I talk to the base commander at CFB Kingston, you talk to people working in mental health and addictions, everybody in society is affected by our housing shortage. There's enormous will to build housing, to make sure we have enough housing, to tackle all the hard problems that we have. I want to be able to tell people the Ontario Liberal Party has your back. A Liberal government will solve the housing problems, will take it seriously, treat it like a crisis. I want people to know that we will treat it carefully, and as a crisis, we will take dramatic action.
Mr. Erskine-Smith.
It is a generational fairness challenge. You referenced students in your question. It's also an economic productivity challenge. When young people are leaving our province in droves, That's unfair, but our economy is not going to be as productive as it needs to be if people can't afford to live and work in this province and in their home communities. Now, what can we do about it? We need serious leadership on three things. We've got to make sure we get governments out of the way, municipal governments especially, to end restrictive zoning, add gentle density everywhere and greater density near transit as of right. We've got to end barriers to smart and sustainable growth. You also need governments to get back in the game on non-market housing. There is a property in my own riding, Metrolinx sold it off near the Danforth GO station, near the Main Street subway station. Guess how many affordable units are being built there? 0. We need governments to use density, to use public land, public dollars to get non-market housing built, and we need to treat housing as a home first and an investment second.
Ms. Crombie.
Yeah. Is your life more affordable today than it was 5 years ago? I bet the answer to that is not. We were sold a pipe dream. Get a great education, you'll get a great job, you'll be able to buy a home or rent the apartment that you want and raise your family. But that's not true today. That's not true because we need a housing first policy. And we need all 4 levels of government to come together for solutions. I am so proud that we launched a housing policy today that involves market housing, rent geared to income housing, deeply subsidized, purpose-built rental for students, for seniors, and for families. There's lots that can change, and I have a lot of experience doing that, having modernized and urbanized the city of Mississauga. We have to change our zoning, is absolutely right. We need exclusive zoning. We need purpose-built rental. We need to use surplus land to build deeply affordable. And we need to reimagine our malls. Particularly, my example in Mississauga, we have a lot of asphalt, and that could be better used to build affordable housing.
Time's up. So now we're going to have 2 minutes of shared debate. Sharing is caring. I didn't hear anyone mention the G word, the green belt, nor did I hear anyone talk about homelessness, but that's just a couple of prompts from me. You have 2 minutes. Who's first?
Well, I would like to say that I know that we can have success. I co-chaired a task force in Kingston on housing. We put out a report with 40 recommendations 3 years ago. And now Kingston is top of the charts in building housing. I know that if we unify people, there's a lot of political will out there. We've already made a lot of progress in Kingston. I know I can do it. I'm determined to do it for all of Ontario, and I need you to join me.
Can we stop the clock for just 5 seconds? And I want to just be helpful here to everyone because there was a Liberal debate last week and they had a speaking order. And I want to make clear, I'm not going to try to, don't raise your finger and let somebody else monopolize the mic. I'm not encouraging you to be rambunctious, but feel free to jump in if someone is talking about their 15-point plan or whatever. Not that you were, but I'm just saying. Okay, so go ahead.
I would like to say that the Greenbelt is sacred. And as Liberals, I know we all believe we need to protect it. What's happened here is cronyism of its worst case. We see Doug Ford's donors and rich friends getting richer. Every mayor across the province of Ontario has told Doug Ford that he does not need to open the Greenbelt to satisfy our housing targets. We will do it within our municipal boundaries.
Can I ask on that? Because I completely agree the Greenbelt is sacred and we shouldn't be open to land swaps, and we only get to protect the Greenbelt if we build the housing and density we need. Now, Mayor Crombie just released this morning an ambitious set of housing policies that match ours. It's incredibly important. Mayor Crombie is still the mayor of Mississauga, though. So does the mayor commit to ending exclusionary zoning with the months she has left?
So as you know, we have committed to exclusionary zoning. I'm so proud of the city of Mississauga. When I became mayor, we were a sleepy suburb, and today we are a booming metropolis, the 3rd largest in Ontario with the 2nd largest economy. We've embraced density and urbanism and densification and unrestricted heights and density in our downtown.
So
we have new communities being built on the waterfront.
Which was around, you'd asked this around homelessness. I ran a homeless shelter just a few blocks down from here. I want to underscore the importance of having supportive and affordable housing. I want to bring it back to the Greenbelt as well. Because the only way that Greenbelt boundaries will change under my leadership is when the Greenbelt gets expanded. The other thing I want to say is a letter came out recently mischaracterizing my position on the Housing Affordability Task Force. 19 of the 55...
Hey, we're out of time. I'm going to stop it there. I know it's going to be a little frustrating finding the balance between interjecting and behaving, so that was terrific. Thank you. All right, our next theme, so remember, it's 2 minutes of shared debate. Our next theme is the economy and affordability. Inflation is higher today than most people in this room can remember. Food prices are soaring. The debt is at record levels. Doug Ford won the last election after cutting gas taxes and sending people checks for canceling the license plate fees. So are taxes too low? Is the debt too high? And how do you persuade people that you can do better when the Liberals have already governed provincially and federally? I am going to start with Mr. Erskine Smith. We're jumping a step.
It's incredibly important that we deliver affordability, and housing affordability is the #1 core challenge on affordability. But we also know too many low-income people are being left behind as well. And there's someone in the audience actually sitting beside my mom, Sherry Torjman, who is one of the architects of the Canada Child Benefit, which has delivered great success in lifting hundreds of thousands of kids out of poverty. Now, you look at people at the provincial level and being unsupported with ODSP levels that haven't been raised in decades. And if we're going to make sure we address affordability for the people in the greatest need, we need not only a competent government, we need a compassionate government that is going to look after those people in need and deliver affordability by increasing ODSP rates and making them more accessible.
Okay. Mr. Hsu.
People send me the notices of rent increases that they're receiving. They send me copies of their household budget. And I think we have to feel how hard it is. We have to guarantee people that we're going to work hard to put a roof over every head, to make sure that people can afford groceries and have money left over for a rainy day. We have to make sure that the average person in Ontario trusts that the Liberal Party will take this problem seriously. In my economic plan, and I put that out very early because I think it's important, we want to help people be as productive as possible for every hour of work. That's what the economists say is going to increase prosperity, the productivity of the work that we put in. So that involves things like training and tools and technology and financing and access to markets for our workers. I know that we can do that. I'm determined to make sure that Ontario fulfills its potential. It has great potential, Ontario. But I need you to join me and join the Ontario Liberal Party.
Mr. Naqvi.
Doug Ford is spending 30% more than the Liberals when we were in government. Has the quality of services that you're receiving gone up by 30%? The answer is probably no. Why? Because all that money is going to his private friends who are providing private delivery. Under my leadership, our #1 task is going to ensure that we are fixing the healthcare system and the education system so you are not have to access private healthcare, pay out of pocket for basic procedures like cataract surgery. So you are not saving money to send your kids to a public school by hiring private tutors because you have lost confidence in our public education system, to make sure that we have got real rent control so you are now being gouged for having a normal rental unit. That is the reality under Doug Ford. And first and foremost, we have to do is to make sure that the important services the provincial government provides, that they are being provided within the public fold so you are not being gouged out of your own pocket.
Dr. Shamji.
There are 3 things that Doug Ford doesn't get. Number 1, he sees things as costs, not investments. 2, he spends on concrete, not people. And 3, he doesn't realize that good social policy is good economic policy.
That's right.
That's the difference between me and him. Under my leadership in the Ontario Liberal Party and for this province, we would put more money in the pockets of Ontarians. We would focus on 4 things. Number 1, we would prioritize people, doing things like ending the appeal on Bill 124, protecting gig workers, and ensuring that they have portable benefits. We'd focus on businesses, like reducing red tape, easing administrative challenges. We would transform our society. We would make sure that the different sectors that make our province prosper, like the agricultural sector in the north, mining throughout the province, have the resources and the legislative framework for them to fire on all cylinders. And then finally, we would take back the word innovation, because it is not the exclusive purview of the Ford government.
Ms. Crombie. I always worry when people have 4-point or 19-point plans, but you hit your mark. Okay, Ms. Crombie.
Doug Ford doesn't care about you. He cares about his rich friends. And I think we all know that. That's why we see skyrocketing rents and skyrocketing price of homes. We need a housing first policy, as we all described. But you know what the difference is? As Liberals, we care. Doug Ford claims he has a $22 billion surplus. That money is sitting in general revenue and isn't being transferred to where it's needed, into infrastructure for deeply deeply affordable housing, into our healthcare, into our education. It's not being invested where it's needed. We have a wait list in Mississauga of 13,000 people for subsidized housing that could be alleviated if the government invested. In Thunder Bay, it was 3,000 people. My food bank needs $1 million just to get through the Thanksgiving season. Rent for a one-bedroom apartment in Mississauga is almost $3,000. In Thunder Bay, it was $1,500. We need initiatives and we need incentives that will help us address affordability.
Okay, we're now going to go to 2 minutes of shared debate. Just as it occurs to me listening to all of you, that the Progressive Conservative Government of Ontario does still work very closely with the federal Liberals on economic questions and investments and so on. That's just a thought. You now have 2 minutes of shared debate.
So one of the areas of affordability that I keep hearing about is from our young people. You know, we've asked our young people to go to college or university to get the best education, but we are putting so much debt on them to get that education. So by the time they leave school, they are behind at least 10 years to start their real lives. And what we need to do is to ensure that we take that burden off them so that when they graduate from school, they do what we're asking them to do. They come out with little or no debt. And so therefore, I want to bring free tuition for college and university students, for families from $90,000 or less, so they have a shot at success. And by the way, we did that under Liberal government, and we saw an increase in participation rates, especially from those kids from those families who came from with no post-secondary education. These are the kind of policies that we need to champion that will allow you to build your life and bring tangible affordability in your life as well.
So I think to win the next election, what we need to do is remind people about the $8 billion of value that Doug Ford has given away to his friends and donors. Just think about $8 billion. It would buy groceries for a year for our poorest families in Ontario.
I'm going to interrupt because I believe our time is up for this round, correct? Yeah, okay. I think Mr. Nakvi wins that round because he took almost 1 minute and 58 seconds. So that's,
We were being too polite, Martin.
I'm not encouraging
I didn't get a word last time around.
I'm not encouraging you to talk over each other, but it is an art form, knowing how to debate without talking over people. So, okay, we're learning as we're going through this. All right, it's time now for the third question, the last theme for this first round. Stay tuned because we'll be picking up the pace in a moment. Our question now is on healthcare and mental health. So you all speak passionately about protecting universal Medicare and against privatizing healthcare. But the reality is that hallway medicine was a big issue in the 2018 election when the Liberals went down to defeat. So not-for-profit clinics were also up and running under the previous Liberal government. So I guess my question is, what would you do differently to get credibility on private care or on long waiting lists for doctors? We're going to go by first names now. So Adil Shamji, you're first up, and not just because you're a doctor. Go ahead.
Well, Martin, the first thing I want to say is the only way that this government has made an impact on hallway medicine has been by closing the hallways in the first place. You know, if we want to address the crisis of healthcare in our midst, number one, privatization is not the answer. When you go to the doctor, the only thing that should matter is patient health, not private wealth. Anything else in which money is the motive undermines the quality of care that you receive. The bedrock and foundation of our healthcare system is people, and we need to be investing in them. We need to end the appeal on Bill 124. We need to make sure that every single one of us has access to team-based primary care. I've delivered a plan that would guarantee that for everyone in our province within 6 years of me forming government. But more than that, we can't just focus on primary care. We need to focus on all of the healthcare workers that allow our healthcare system to operate, the 280 professions like lab technologists, paramedics, and all of those kinds of things. And we need to have a massive focus on home care, community care, long-term care, and of course, hospitals in the process as well.
Okay, next, Bonnie Crombie.
Thank you. So first off, let's say we all agree we're going to repeal Bill 124.
Here, here.
Let's start there, here.
It's already been
Stop the private clinics.
already, but
I think we all agree. Hallway medicine has actually increased by about 22%, not decreased. We have 2 million Ontarians that don't have a family doctor. So obviously we need to increase spaces, create new medical schools, boost the numbers, allow those who are being trained offshore to have spaces to train in hospitals, recruit more doctors and nurses, particularly our nurses, they could have a one-year certificate program. You know, when I was in Cochrane, I was speaking to about 35 Liberals. You know what they told me? They had received funding for 5 doctors, but they weren't able to recruit 5 doctors. They were in competition with Kapuskasing and Hearst and Timmins to a degree, but they recruited 4 nursing practitioners, but the government wouldn't transfer the money to the nursing practitioners. That is a lack of common sense, and that is wrong, and that has to change. So there's so much we can do to attract...
Nate Erskine-Smith.
Doug Ford stands at a microphone and says, the status quo in healthcare is broken. And many people feel that. 12 hours at an emergency room, 2.2 million people don't have access to a family doctor. But his answer then is, we're going to benefit friends and we're going to privatize. And we need to defend equity in the system, there's no question about it. We also need to defend innovation and efficiency in the nonprofit system. Now, we need to address the health human resource crisis. It touches home care, it touches nursing, it touches access to family health teams and doctors. We need a family health team for absolutely everyone. We need mental health to be treated as health, and substance use and those challenges to be treated as health issues. We need to make sure that our seniors are aging and we don't leave long-term care beds as the only solution, but we invest in home and community care so our seniors can age with dignity. And we need to make sure we take a preventative approach to health care, not just a reactive one, and we deliver public health.
Okay, I am sorry. So Nate, we just did. Ted Hsu.
I have a plan that's several pages long, but I think I'll just skip that and talk about an experience that I had when I met people in Wawa. They have room for 7 doctors, but they only have 2 right now. They just lost one. And you know, whoever's the leader of the Ontario Liberal Party is going to have to try to do something in the next 2.5 years. It's 2.5 years till the next election. What are you going to do during that 2.5 years? I found out in Wawa that the doctor they just lost, they only have 6 months of money to pay for a temporary doctor. And then after that, the money goes away. It used to be that you figured out you could probably hire a replacement doctor in 6 months. That's not the case anymore. So little rules like that have to change. As the leader of the Ontario Liberal Party, from now until the next election, there are a lot of things that you can do as a member of opposition. I have a lot of experience, probably more than anybody here, in opposition, but it is important that we try to get things done between now and 2026. I don't want to wait until 2026.
Yes, Sir Nakvi.
How many of you know a doctor or nurse who's qualified from some other jurisdiction in the world is unable to practice medicine here in Ontario? Raise your hand. You know them all. You've been in an Uber and they've driven you home. That's what we need to change. We need to make sure that internationally trained doctors and nurses are able to get licensed as quickly as possible and practice in all our communities across the province. This is personal to me. 35 years ago, when my family came to Canada, both my parents were lawyers and were not able to practice a single day in this province. A whole generation gone. We have to stop that. We need to make sure that those 4,000 doctors who live in Ontario right now are unable to practice medicine get the chance to do it. That's a practical solution. That's a starting point, but that's how we're going to make sure that we get good doctors, nurses, and other healthcare professionals in Northern Ontario and rural Ontario in our emergent labor centers, and I will get that done.
Okay, well, we now have a minute of shared time. I didn't hear anyone talk about mental health, and I can tell you that we got a lot of questions on mental health, and every time we have a democracy forum, it comes up. That's just a hint. You have 1 minute of shared time.
So I think that mental health care should be included in our Ontario OHIP. Health care should be mental health care as well. What we've seen since COVID is a rise in suicide rates, a rise in the opioid crisis. Suicide rates, in fact, have increased 3 times since before COVID, and this government has no programs in place to solve them. We need prevention programs, treatment programs, rehab programs.
Because of the opioid crisis, it's really important everyone has, and Yasser is exactly right. We need foreign trained professionals to
we need more than foreign trained doctors. That's more than a healthcare plan.
Agreed. But at the end of the day, when it comes to substance use, it's very important to many people that thousands of people lost their lives, and it's a deeply challenging political issue.
Nate,
so I'm in agreement with everyone.
If there are counselors
so do we all agree that we should treat substance use as a health issue? I know Adel agrees.
Yeah, there certainly is no argument there, but what I do want to say is, number one, on the issue about what all of you can do. You can join in my legislative work. I have a province-wide petition with thousands of signatures. You can join my province-wide campaign. The same campaign that has allowed us, our Ontario Liberal Party, to repair relationships with public and private sector unions. There's so much that every single one of us can do that, unfortunately, I have to disagree with my friend Ted here. We do not have to wait for 2.5 years.
No, I'm saying we don't have to wait, and we cannot wait
Okay, perfect.
for 2.5 years. That's why we have to go and push the government to solve this problem in Wawa. And on mental health, I will add that access to mental health falls off a cliff as you move away from the urban centers, and that's something we have to push hard on.
We agree
I want to
that
stop
every issue
I want
that
to stop the bleeding of our Canadian students going abroad to get their healthcare education, because we haven't made appropriate investments in our medical schools in the north, here in the south, and in our nursing schools, and that has to be a priority.
Every issue we face here are far more acute in the north. Mental illness is on the rise everywhere, particularly in our schools. We've seen in our high schools and our colleges and our universities, do you have counselors here locally that you can go to, make an appointment to treat you if you need help and guidance?
Okay, time's up. I wanted to let you finish that thought. Our time is up. No, I'm sorry. So I want to just keep the peace by saying that you've given me an opening to plug the new medical school at TMU.
Right.
So thank you.
Let's not forget that, because we need more space.
On the heels
For section 2, you'll all have a chance momentarily. We're going to pick up the pace a little bit. These were all important questions, but heavy duty. We still have some important questions, but we're going to do them faster even. Quick questions, rapid responses. They know what's coming, not the topics, but the time limits. I'm going to announce the time limit before each question. It's going to be anywhere from 5 to 20 seconds. There will not be a yellow card, just a red card.
Try to be in opposition.
So there's no overtime. Please watch the time. First question: if Doug Ford's Tories lose their majority in the next election, but still have the largest number of seats, which would be the most likely scenario, more or less. The question is, would you prop them up in power, or would you bring them down by working with another party, NDP and Greens, in some kind of alliance or non-alliance, informal alliance? Yes, no, or won't say. You have 10 seconds, and we're starting with Yasser Naqvi.
I cannot support a corrupt government under Doug Ford.
Okay, next is Ted Hsu.
No, most corrupt government in Ontario history, we can't support them.
Nate.
Bring them down. There's no other answer.
Bonnie Crombie.
Take down Doug Ford however we can, as soon as we can. Bring on 2026.
Adil Shamji.
I will work with anyone who will work with me to take down Doug Ford.
Okay. One of the reasons we do these as rapid fire questions is sometimes I'm afraid they might all agree with each other, so I don't want you to have 3 minutes of debate where they're all agreeing with each other. But I wanted to just check. If you lose the leadership on December 2nd, will you still run for the Ontario Liberals in the next election in 2026 as an MPP? Yes, no, or we'll see. You have 5 seconds. Mr. Hsu,
Yes.
first.
Yes.
I'm losing my order here. Mr. Hsu, and then Yasser? Sorry.
Yes.
Okay, Adil.
Of course.
Bonnie.
Yes?
Nate, did we get you?
I'll have conversations with my family because we have an excellent MPP in Mary Margaret McMahon already in Beaches East York. But I'll support the Liberal Party in any way in defeating Doug Ford in the next election.
Okay, you went over the 5 seconds, but I did have a mark here for bonus time for anybody who was unclear. So I'm going to give Mr. Erskine-Smith an extra 10 seconds to elaborate. I think I heard we'll see, or?
Yeah, look, you got to know Mary Margaret McMahon is an excellent MPP for Beaches East York. I would not have a home riding. And so I will continue to support her. If there's an opportunity for me to contribute otherwise, of course I will.
Okay, time's up. Third question. If you win the leadership, I'm not prejudging anything here, what role would you give the other candidates? You have 10 seconds, starting with Mr. Naqvi.
Well, you're looking at my star team right here. I mean, this is the most incredible thing about this race is the 5 really strong candidates who really believe in the Liberal Party, and under my leadership, all these 4 incredible people have very important roles.
Time's up.
To defeat Doug Ford in 2026.
Next is Dr. Shamji.
Every single one of these amazing candidates would outperform every single person in the Progressive Conservative Party. And so they will be at my side under my leadership.
Okay, next is Ms. Crombie.
We have 5 amazing candidates in this race that bring such incredible expertise to the table, not like that other party that had a coronation. We have people fighting to lead this party, and that is so exciting. There is a role for every one of them and every one of you.
Mr. Erskine-Smith.
Karen McCrimmon texted me before coming here and she said, real serious leadership means that you empower people around you and you don't have a top-down approach. We will empower people around us, including those on stage.
And Mr. Xu, did I get you? Yeah. Right.
This group is the core of a fabulous cabinet. I would trust the group here and ask them, tell me why I'm wrong. And I would try to listen and understand to what they told me.
Okay, that question clearly didn't work, so we'll go with another.
What were you expecting?
We'll go with a tougher one. I was expecting more specificity. Good question. I was expecting like a specific role, but there you are.
Very specific in 15 seconds.
So here's a tougher one. Can you? This is an old chestnut that comes up at a lot of debates. Can you say something nice about any of your rivals? And here's the tricky part. Please don't all pick on the same person as the nice person. Go ahead. We'll start with Adil Shamji. You're first.
They all bring unparalleled experiences, career politicians.
Okay, next is Bonnie Crombie.
Well, if I needed a doctor, I would choose Adil Shamji to be my doctor.
There we go.
I think we have some great legal expertise, and we have a physicist, oh my gosh, who is at Goldman Sachs. I am so impressed by their credentials. When I say we have 5 great candidates,
Time's up.
we really do.
Nate Erskine-Smith.
I'm going to talk about Yasser because he was a provincial politician for a considerable amount of time. He was a cabinet minister, and he lost that election in 2018, but he came back to serve his community in federal politics, and he's come back again to serve in this race.
Okay, Ted Xu.
I enjoy in the legislature turning around, and I know Adil's going to be right there. We chat about what's going on and how we can best approach the debate that's coming up.
Yasser Naqvi. It doesn't have to be Nate Erskine-Smith.
I was going to reciprocate to Nate Erskine-Smith because I've watched Nate do politics for some time and admired his principled liberalism, which I aspire to do, and carving out space in a very crowded room at the House of Commons and having a voice that is making an impact.
Time's up. Thank you. I think I got you all. Am I right? Yes. If I ever forget somebody, please let me know. I have the hardest job trying to multitask all these different rotations. Okay. Can you tell me what the minimum wage is in Ontario today? I bet there are a lot of people in this room who could tell us. I'm going to start with Nate Erskine-Smith.
The minimum wage is, I think, $16.50 an hour or so, but it's got to be increased, and we got to have catch-up payments in a serious way.
Okay, and I apologize. I should have said 5 seconds. Ted Xu.
I haven't looked it up. It's probably around between $15 and $17. I think we should have a different minimum wage in different parts
I'll come back
of the
on a follow-up. So Yasser Naqvi.
I believe it's around 16 or 16.50 right now.
Adil Shamji.
I believe it's $15.50.
Yeah.
And Bonnie Crombie.
It's $15.50.
The answer is it's $15.50 an hour. It was not just a skill testing question. It was actually an attempt to try to bring out another answer from you, which is that Doug Ford held back the minimum wage when he won in 2018. It was supposed to go up to $15. He canceled it, and then he froze it. People forget this for another almost 3 years at $14 an hour. So would you raise it to make up for lost time? And by how much? What would you set the minimum wage at? You each have 10 seconds. Same rotation. Nate Erskine-Smith, you're first.
So the minimum wage will be $16.50 on October 1st of this year, and we have to have catch-up payments, no question. So we are going to deliver a minimum wage that keeps up with inflation and that catches up from the freeze that Doug Ford put in place.
Ted Xu.
It's got to be different in different parts of the province where the cost of living is different. If you want to have a living wage, it's going to vary from place to place. And I think that is something from the last platform we didn't emphasize enough.
Yasser
We'll
Naqvi.
be emphasizing in the next election.
Yasser Naqvi.
We need to make sure that people can live affordable lives. I firmly believe in taking politics out of determining minimum wage. As Minister of Labor, I brought in a system where it was calculated based on cost of
Adil
living
Shamji. Adil
and
Shamji.
increases accordingly.
There's no doubt that, that wages need to go up, but there's no amount of an increase in minimum wage that can compensate for the runaway increases in rent and housing affordability. And so addressing that issue is going to take a comprehensive approach that goes beyond
Bonnie Crombie.
You know, the minimum wage would be higher today under the previous policies of Kathleen Wynne. When the Ford government came in, he froze it, and it's not at the level it would be. And we need to repeal 124 and honor our healthcare heroes, the people we called heroes during COVID. And we need a fair wage for those same.
We're going to go to to the next question. When we had our first democracy forum in 2018 with all the party leaders, they debated the declining electoral turnout. As it turns out, it actually went up in the election of 2018, but as most of you know, it has been going down since. It went down to just 43% in last year's election. Question is, why? How do you fix it? This one is 20 seconds. We'll start with Bonnie Crombie.
So municipal politics, the voting rate is even lower, and as it was provincially extremely low, there is a combination of voter apathy or not being excited by the parties in power, or perhaps we felt that the Doug Ford government was going to win the majority and people stayed home. People were disillusioned and stayed home, disillusioned by the policies. Others were pragmatic and voted for other
Time's up. Nate Erskine-Smith.
We can't just be the not Doug Ford party. We have to give people a positive reason to get to the polls and to vote for us. It's about values, of course, liberal values, and articulating those values. It's about big ideas, ambitious ideas on the challenges in our lives all across this province. And at the end of the day, it's about integrity and authenticity. For people to trust in the possibility of politics, we have to act with integrity.
Ted Hsu.
The voting rate has been going down for decades, actually. It's decreasing trust in public institutions. We have to restore that. We have to earn trust. And when I talk to people who are thinking of maybe not voting, I think they're saying, why does it matter? Why do I believe in the Liberal Party? Does it matter if I go and vote? So we have to answer that question. Yes.
Yes or no? Yes or no?
Trust. Trust is going to be the #1 question, and Ontarians have lost trust in their government and in their premier. And that's why Liberals have to elect a principled Liberal who will not cozy to the same elites and insiders as Doug Ford. That is going to be the defining issue in this campaign and in the next one in 2026.
Adil Shamji.
We have to inspire people to believe that their voice and their vote actually count for anything anymore. When we see things like in the last election where Doug Ford said he's not going to touch the green belt, and then he touches the green belt. He says he's not going to privatize healthcare, then he privatizes healthcare. That's exactly the kind of thing that disincentivizes people to believe that it doesn't matter about voting. But with strong ideas, with integrity, with compassion, with service, we can change.
Time's up. Sorry to be so brusque on the cutoffs, but we have to keep the show on the road. Ontarians voted against proportional representation in a referendum in 2007. Would you reopen the question of electoral reform if you want power? Yes or no? 5 seconds. Ted Hsu, please.
Yes, I voted for mixed member proportional in the House of Commons, so I'm on the record. I also ran or was one of the leaders
yes
of
or
the
no?
campaign in Kingston.
Yes or Nakvi?
I voted in 2007 in support of mixed member proportional representation, so I'm open to the discussion, but first we got to fix healthcare and education in Ontario.
The next is Adil Shamji.
I support a citizens' assembly to tell us what model makes the most sense to us and to hold us accountable after that's recommended.
And Bonnie Crombie.
Well, I agree with Adil. I spoke to the same groups, and they want a citizens' assembly to make recommendations. I also believed in ranked ballot and electronic voting. And yes, I think we are a spark.
And Nate Erskine-Smith.
Turn back trust.
Nate Erskine-Smith.
Yes, every vote should count. In the last election, the Liberals secured 24% of the vote and only 7% of the seats in the chamber.
So time's up, but there's a second round of follow-up, and some of you jumped the gun, and bless you for that. My question is, if your answer was yes, what is your preferred system? I heard some of you talk about the process. I'm not asking about the consultation process. I think people are curious to know, what is your recommended electoral system, or are you agnostic? We'll start, same rotation. Ted Hsu, please.
I think a citizens' assembly is a great idea, but one thing I do not like, which would be bad for this system, is party lists. I don't like party lists. My favorite system is a regional top-up, where somebody represents a place.
Yes or Nakvi?
I've always liked mixed member proportional representation because I think it brings two systems together with really strict regulatory oversight on the party list and making sure that there's gender parity and regional alignment on that list.
I see the advantages and disadvantages of many different models and therefore support a process we can trust as opposed to an outcome that can be gamed by whoever the next leader is.
Bonnie Crombie.
So I'd be concerned, but I'm willing to look at it, but I am concerned that too many parties are created, and then you get legislative paralysis. We've seen this internationally. However, I would be willing to take the advice of a citizens' assembly if that's the direction, the recommendation they made.
So we got to have ranked ballots immediately for municipal elections, and at the party level, provincially and federally, it's got to be mixed member PR or single transferable vote. Mixed member PR makes more sense given the geography of Ontario.
Okay. Here's a language question. Parlez-vous français? And if not, will you take French lessons? You can answer in either official language. You have 10 seconds, starting with Yasser Naqvi.
Je travaille fort et apprends français, c'est très important pour moi et parle en français. Mes enfants fréquentent une école française aussi à Ottawa.
Okay. Adel Shamji.
Oui, je parle français, mais je dois apprendre plus.
Bonnie Crombie.
Oui, je parle un peu français, mais ne pas très bien. Je aussi parler le polonais.
Nate Erskine-Smith.
Je ne parle pas français parfait, mais j'ai pris les leçons avant la pandémie, tête à tête, 1 heure par semaine. Et depuis la pandémie, j'ai fait rien, donc je dois apprendre les leçons encore.
And Ted Hsu.
Oui, je parle français, mais je pense que l'essentiel, c'est de pouvoir à l'écoute des citoyens. Ce n'est pas parler français, mais de comprendre quelqu'un qui s'exprime dans leur langue maternelle.
Okay, sorry about that mic drop. It was a water bottle drop. Follow-up question. What other languages can you speak? You don't have to demonstrate now, but I think people are often interested in knowing what else you can say. So just asking, and we'll do the same rotation. Yasser Naqvi.
मेरी मादरी ज़बान उर्दू है.
So Urdu, okay. And Ted, Adel, yes.
Well, I understand Gujarati and Kutchi when my parents speak it to me, and my wife is teaching me Swahili.
Okay. Bonnie.
Ja rozmawiam po polsku I tak samo ja rozumiem po ukraińsku.
Okay. I know that language. Polish.
And
Nate.
Ukrainian.
If you ask my wife, I can barely speak English some days. So no, I speak English, and I'm doing my best in French.
Ted.
Yeah, I speak Mandarin Chinese, so I'll just say, 对爸爸妈妈打个招呼.
谢谢. Okay.
All of us can bring greetings in every language.
There you are. All right, we're going to go to part 3 now. We're moving to the bigger themes that were suggested by the audience. Same rules as before, 1 minute of response from all 5 candidates, 2 minutes of open debate. And we're going to shift to our student co-host today, Lila Mansour, who will present the questions. Lila is a second-year student in the Lycan Alexander School of Law at TMU and is a fellow in the Can Study US program at the DAIS here on campus. She has a BA in Economics and Global Studies, and she has debated on the floor of the House of Commons when she was chosen for the Daughters of the Vote trip to Ottawa. Lila?
Thank you so much, Martin. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon. Welcome to all the candidates. Now, the first question is on higher education, which isn't a surprise as a law student. A blue ribbon panel on post-secondary funding will issue its report in a few weeks. The fact is that the system is starved for cash because the Ford government cut tuition by 10% 5 years ago when he came to power in 2018, and they've kept it frozen at that lower level ever since. And they never made up that money to colleges and universities, which continue to face rising costs, just like us as students. So my questions to you are, will you remove that freeze? By how much do you plan to raise tuition? And how would you make up for that funding shortfall that Ford made much worse? So, Ms. Crombie, you're first.
So as I mentioned earlier, there is a $22 billion sitting in revenue that is called surplus, that is not being transferred where it's needed, including our elementary schools, our high schools, and our post-secondary institutions like this one. $1,200 per student has been cut. That money has to get reinvested in our schools, in our education. We need to recruit more educators, and we should all have a policy that if you get the grade, that you should go. So of course, we should make tuition very affordable. We should increase our OSAP loans and our grants, and we want to ensure that you get the best education and you're qualified for the jobs of tomorrow. Thank you.
Okay. I'm back just as the timekeeper, so I can play the heavy. Mr. Erskine-Smith.
The Ford government is marked by decisions in their electoral short-term interest at the expense of the long-term public interest, and we see that in post-secondary education. And there are two things that we fundamentally need to do. Cost should never be a barrier to post-secondary opportunities. So we need free tuition for low-income families. We need greater OSAP investment and OSAP grants in particular for middle-income families. And we need to make sure that repayment obligations, no interest on student loans, but repayment obligations are flexible and contingent on income. We also need to make sure that the provincial government invests more in baseline operational funding so we don't see what we see today, which is a tuition freeze, no increases from the provincial government, and post-secondary institutions are balancing their books on the backs of exploiting international students.
Mr. Hsu.
You know, I wonder why that Blue Ribbon panel hasn't released its results. It's overdue. And I think it's because they're saying we've got to spend more money on post-secondary education, and the Ford government doesn't want to do that. I think we should hold the Ford government to what is in the task force, the Blue Ribbon panel report. Let's connect the dots. The Ford government froze funding, leaving the universities, as Nate says, to go and charge tuition to international students at whatever the market will bear. And it's an unsustainable financial model. Now we've got a lot of international students in Kingston, North Bay, Brampton. We have students camping out at the beginning of the school year because they don't have enough places to live. It's something that we have to fix, and it's because it's based on a financial model that's not sustainable. Let's look at that Blue Ribbon Task Force report and hold the Ford government accountable.
Mr. Naqvi.
I came to this country at age 15. I hardly spoke any English. I'm standing here before you in this position, seeking this role because of quality, affordable public education system. This is an investment we must make. So I will reevaluate the funding formula for our colleges and universities and make sure that they're funded properly. As I mentioned to you earlier, I will make tuition free for our college and university students, especially if they come from modest income families. I will waive interest on OSAP loans so that government is not making money off you. And number three, I will cap international student fees as well so those students have a shot at success and hopefully stay in Ontario and help us build a better life for themselves and us. Thank you.
Dr. Shamji.
There are many reasons why post-secondary institutions and students are in the situation that they're in. We already heard about the Ford government cutting operational and infrastructure funding to colleges and universities. They also cut OSAP. And if you're a student now, you've probably gone on the website trying to see how much you'll get. You can move the slider over and it tells you how much you'll get in terms of loans, not grants anymore. They instituted a tuition freeze that has made it difficult for the colleges and universities to get the revenue that they need. And now the only remaining way to balance the books is on the back of international students, who far too often are brought to Canada with false hopes through predatory recruiting agencies around the world. All of those things need to get fixed because those are the root causes for why we are where we are. Along the way, we need to get student housing right. We need to make sure that Bill 124 never comes back because it affects our faculty and the support workers who make our colleges and universities work. And we need to make sure that the mental health and addiction supports for students are there so that when they show up in class, they can thrive.
Okay, 2 minutes of shared debate. I didn't hear much from everyone specific to Lila's question about whether you would end the freeze and raise tuition and by how much, but it's your 2 minutes. Go ahead.
I've been speaking to students across the province. In fact, I was at UTM yesterday and Guelph, Windsor this weekend. Do you know what foreign students are charged? Do we have any foreign students in the room? $21,000 per semester. Right, and our post-secondaries have to do that because of the cuts, about $1,200 per student, that the Ford government is not focused on education. They'd rather be at war with the union, so there's no stability for our educators. And there are strike votes being taken right now. We need stability, and yes, I think it was Adil who said, let's repeal Bill 124 so that they earn a fair wage as well. That's what we need in the system.
The answer to the question, though, around tuition and freezing and making sure tuition remains affordable comes back to baseline operational funding. Because you only make that work if you squeeze international students. And already, you look at St. Clair College in Windsor, they had 7 or so international students. 2001, they're around 7,000, more than half the student population. It is unsustainable. Something has to give. And the one thing that can give to make it more sustainable is by delivering baseline operational funding to make the system work.
Ontario has the lowest per full-time student funding for post-secondary of any province. It's clear that we have to spend more money on post-secondary. Here's something that we need to work on. Mental health for post-secondary students is one of the top problems that we have to face. Universities are, even in the last 10 years, I think have made a lot of progress. We have to prevent, we have to detect, we have to help people cope, and then we have special services that are needed for certain people. All of these things take money. This is the number one thing that post-secondary students are struggling with, I would say.
Thanks, Ted. And I just want to jump in and say that the preoccupation so far has felt as though it's on universities. And we can't help but emphasize how important it is to have support for our colleges, to ensure that we have, for example, the next generation of skilled trades workers. We can't just think in terms of universities.
But in addition to operational funding, they need infrastructure funding, because let's get more student housing built as well.
Okay, time's up.
Okay, next question is on the environment and global warming. What's your plan to achieve net zero emissions and support Ontario families in adapting to climate change? How does popularity of Green Party leader Mike Schreiner, who was asked by many Liberals to join this leadership race, suggest that you're just not up to the job when it comes to the environment? You are first, Mr. Erkinson-Smith.
So when Catherine McKenna was the Environment Minister federally, I was pushing her for more ambition. And in the course of this leadership, she supported us and she's pushing us for more ambition. We delivered more ambition in our set of policies. But it's not just about ambition. And we need to make sure we actually have a climate plan with that ambition. The current government doesn't even have a climate plan. Now, a plan is one thing. You also need accountability for that plan. It's about ambition, accountability, and then action. We should, as a provincial government, have an accountability framework, an independent accountability framework that pushes us to deliver on our goals. Now, in terms of that action, it's about creating jobs, it's about investing and supporting the critical mineral sector, it's about making sure we are retrofitting homes for homeowners, small businesses, public buildings. It's about making sure we are taking adaptation steps to make sure that we are prepared, whether it's wildfires or flood risks, we are better prepared. And at the end of the day, if we do this right, it's about not just protecting the planet for our kids and creating jobs, it's also about lowering energy bills. That is, we can do all three, we will deliver the ambition that we need.
Mr. Hsu.
I've got a story to tell. In Kingston, my Green Party opponent from last year left the Green Party, joined the Ontario Liberal Party so that he could work on my leadership campaign. He's been signing up members because he believes, he trusts that I will get things done. I'm the only one of the leadership candidates who's worked on environment. I ran a sustainable energy association. I worked on environment before I got into politics. This is very, very important to me. Last year, I got the endorsement from Green PAC, which endorses candidates from all parties. There's nobody else that you can trust to take our environmental challenges seriously. I've got a very detailed plan about energy. And the other thing is, you know, we have to cut our emissions in half by 2030. The next election doesn't even come till 2026. There's so much we have to do in opposition. And I'm determined to push the government as hard as I can, and I need your help.
Okay, Mr. Naqvi.
I've got my son is 11, my daughter is 7, and they're my conscience on the environment. They're amazing at recycling. They know how to sort it all right. They're the one who are turning off all the lights in every single room, which is good, right? This is the kind of behavioral change that we need to do, and we have to do this for our children. We need practical liberal plan to deal with the environment that's good for the environment, that's good for the economy, and is good for our communities, because we need that community buy-in for any climate change plan to work. One of the practical ideas I have, and Liberals have a strong record on this, is to clean our electricity sector. We need to produce more electricity as part of fighting climate change. We already took dirty coal out of our electric system to make Ontario's electricity grid that much more cleaner. We need to go a step further and take dirty natural gas also out of our system so that it's 100% clean by 2035, so that we can really invest in producing more electricity that can fuel our homes, our cars, and other things necessary so that we are reducing emissions. And of course, we need to protect the green belt and grow it.
Time's up. You're blessed, Mr. Nakvi, because my 20 and 19-year-olds never turn off the lights. I turn off the lights all the time. So you're one step ahead of me.
I'll send my kids over. They're good.
Dr. Shanji.
Thank you, Martin. You know, every summer, unfortunately, predictably, we see runaway wildfires in the north.
Yep.
And predictably, in the emergency department, the room fills with people with their respiratory illnesses and their asthma exacerbations because the air quality is so poor. Me standing on this stage is because I want to write a prescription to fix that. And that prescription has 3 things on it. Number 1, we've got to get conservation right. We have to expand our protected land and defend our green belt. We have to support the transition away from greenhouse gas emissions with mitigation and adaptation. We have to end natural gas plants. And we need to increase the amount of climate resilience we have so that when there are forest fires, we're in a situation where we have the resources to fight them, unlike the Ford government, which cut millions of dollars to those services. And then finally, we need to transform our economy so that economic interests and environmental interests are aligned, such as with electric vehicles, with EV infrastructure across the province, and supporting green jobs and green technology.
Ms. Crombie.
This is the #1 issue for this generation. They are passionate about greening our economy, about climate change, ensuring that that politicians believe it to be a reality. And we know that Doug Ford has stuck his head in the sand. You see the response to the wildfires and the flooding. We all want to get to net zero before 2050. And you know what? We're really blessed because we have some candidates here who have given this a lot of thought and have some pretty incredible policies up on your websites. And some of them have worked in the space, so I thank them. But we've all talking about the same thing, investing in renewable energy, whether it's hydro, wind, solar, investing in clean tech. As mayor, I bring a lot of investment in clean tech jobs to my city. Investing in public transit to get people out of their cars and onto public transit. Those are very key things, but conservation, adaptation, mitigation measures are critical. Thank you.
Okay. Did I forget anyone? No, we've got you all, correct? Oh,
We get 2 minutes.
yes, thank you. This is why I need a co-host. 2 minutes of shared debate. I got so mesmerized by the soliloquies. 2 minutes of shared debate. Thank you, Shukran, Laila. Open to you.
I gotta take issue. So Ted has a great set of climate policies, but when he says he's the only one to work on the environment, in the lead up to 2019, I introduced a bill, net zero by 2050. It became part of our platform, part of our climate accountability law, which I also worked with Minister Wilkinson to strengthen. Now, Adal's right when we talk about conservation, so I do have a question. Mayor Crombie, are you still open to land swaps on the Greenbelt?
You know, I am not going to attack or put my fellow candidates on the spot because we're all liberals and we're all one family. And I've been very clear. I have been very clear that I believe in protecting and preserving our green belt, as we all do. And you know, I wouldn't want to be in an ad in case your leader criticizing you.
No isn't.
I want to say something about the job that we're running for. We're running for leader of the Ontario Liberal Party, not for premier yet. The climate clock is ticking. There's so little time left, we have to cut our emissions. Whoever is the leader of the Ontario Liberal Party is going to have to be working from opposition to push the government to reduce emissions. I'm the one who has experience in opposition. I'm the one who has experience working in sustainable energy. If you're worried about climate change, you have to choose the leader who has worked in that area and understands the urgency and will start as the leader of an opposition party and not wait until he's premier.
We have to fund cities to be more resilient as well. I always like to say that the federal government has all the money, the provincial government has all the powers, and cities have all the problems. And I can speak firsthand as a mayor for almost 9 years now. There are so many initiatives that we can also learn towards our goal from our cities. We put $225 million aside for mitigation and adaptation measures, and I'm very proud. Let me share with you something. We all want to move towards battery power vehicles or electric vehicles, and of course we're greening our fleets, but the cost is still very high, and it goes on the property tax owner rather than on the province.
Okay, time's up. We're going to go to our next question. Lila.
Our third question, which is quite near and dear to my heart, is how would a liberal government engage meaningfully in racial justice and change? How would you tackle anti-Black racism? What will you do to protect LGBTQ and transgender rights, given what's happening in the US and in parts of this country? How would you promote reconciliation with Indigenous communities?
Mr. Hsu.
Thank you. I was reminded of when I was young, my mom used to tell us that we should dress up when we went out, and that was a tool to neutralize racism. One thing that bothers me is that racial economic inequality has persisted, especially for certain groups. Even though we've had multiculturalism and anti-racism and a charter, there are certain groups where racial economic inequalities persisted. So I think to combat that, we've got to encourage excellence in schools, advancement in the professions, success of businesses. And I think one of the data will show that one of the communities, Black businesses, Black students, Black communities, that's a community in which racial economic inequality has persisted. And we've got to fight that, and I think a way to do that is to encourage economic success.
Okay, Mr. Naqvi.
Shortly after 9/11, I was traveling for work. I was an international trade lawyer, as you heard, and I was passing through Miami, and I was held back by the US authorities under the Patriot Act because they wanted to see if I was a threat to the United States of America. It's probably the only moment in my life I thought, I'm going to rot in some jail in Karachi. And it was a very difficult moment, and since that day, it has been a cause for me to fight inequalities, no matter who the person is, everywhere, especially fiercely defending rights of minorities in our country. That's non-negotiable. And by the way, it's not something far off either. Look what's happening in Quebec right now. A majority bill has taken away the rights of Muslim women, Sikh men, Jewish men from having public sector jobs. We cannot allow that to happen in Ontario. I will not allow that to happen anywhere in Canada.
Dr. Shamji.
I think leadership is an act of service. In my entire career, I have had the honor of serving groups and populations who have been most marginalized and who've been most vulnerable. I've had the honor of working with First Nations people on the James Bay coast and Inuvialuit in the Arctic. I've had the honor of serving immigrants and refugees in the emergency department in some of our racialized neighborhoods here in Toronto. I've had the honor of, I've had the honor of going into schools where children have not, come from families where their parents can't make ends meet. And what I would say is, number one, we have to listen. And we have to be rooted in wanting to help and in wanting to serve. And what I've learned is that when we listen with authenticity, when we serve, when we address economic challenges, when we undo some of the hurtful things that the Ford government has done, like eradicate our anti-racism and anti-hatred directorate that we had up until 2018, then we can reconcile and we can achieve social justice for all of us.
Ms. Crombie.
You know, what's wrong is what we're seeing today. We're seeing that US politics being exported here, the divisiveness and that dog whistle style, and it's simply wrong. And I'm grateful to all of our candidates who spoke out against those hate rallies that are occurring today. Every one of us must make our voice loud and clear that we have no tolerance for any sort of intolerance, no matter what it is. Anti-LGBTQ, to protecting our children, to protect the Black community, to to speak out against anti-Semitism or Islamophobia or hatred wherever we see it. And we have a strong track record in Mississauga. Of course, I'm so blessed to have so many people from different cultures, and we've done a lot. I have a very strong record on this issue because unfortunately I've had to speak out, and I always do. My Black Caucus came back with 60 recommendations to eliminate systemic racism in our city hall and in our city. We have truth and reconciliation programs happening, and we have also strong programs for, oh, am I tied up? Sorry, I'll continue later.
Yeah, Mr. Erskine-Smith.
Canada's on the stage. There are differences between us on some issues, not on this one. Everyone in the school system deserves to be free and safe to be who they are, regardless of their sexual orientation, their gender identity, their race, their religious faith. That is a core value in our public school system, and we all stand behind it. And we also need that school system to make sure we address all kinds of hate and discrimination. There's no question about it. And it's whether it's Islamophobia, transphobia, homophobia, racism, anti-Black racism, whether it's racism as against Indigenous peoples. We need that curriculum, by the way, on reconciliation, not only to teach about the history of the injustice towards Indigenous people in residential schools, but also to lift in a very positive way, positive examples of the contributions of Indigenous people to the history of this country. Now, Ted's exactly right. We also need to lift people up. It's about economic reconciliation. When you look at a map of COVID and where it impacted Toronto, the same map of low-income families impacted and racialized family impacted, it is the same map, and we need income security and the social determinants of health to be delivered to deliver real equality in the end.
Okay, you've all been very eloquent about identifying the problem. Here's a follow-up from a student. Quote, there is increased political and cultural divisiveness taking place in Ontario. What can you do to bring people of all different political beliefs, all beliefs, together in mutual tolerance? You don't have to answer that question, but you have 2 minutes of shared debate.
I was going to actually raise this point. We're living in really fragile times at the moment. There's so many divisions, and the mark of a leader is going to be someone who brings people together. What we need is a healer-in-chief, not somebody who divides people. And what we're seeing with Doug Ford, unfortunately, is dog whistle politics, is to distract people from his woes because police is knocking at his door by dividing people. And we, and I'm really proud of all of us standing here, are going to resist that temptation and bring people together so we can build Ontario up, build Canada up, not tear people apart.
And there are challenging conversations on this, no question. I was just at the counter-protest before coming here, and it's an interesting mix of people who are protesting equality in the school system. There are PPC signs there, and I don't think we're reaching many PPC voters, if I'm being honest, but there are Muslim and other faith families there in good faith, and that requires real, meaningful dialogue if we're going to build bridges and make sure we, in the best possible way, protect all rights.
We need to stand with our people. We need to stand shoulder to shoulder when we see these incidents of hatred and racism occur. In my city, I'm so blessed, as I mentioned, we say Happy Hanukkah, Eid Mubarak, Shub Diwali, doesn't matter, Merry Christmas. We celebrate each other, and no one should live in fear of practicing their religion, live in fear of persecution or threat. At the Dar El Tawhid Mosque in Mississauga, an intruder came in when people were praying behind their back and opened a full assault. And that person only got 7 years in our penal system.
I couldn't agree more, and that's why, in fact, I'm the only candidate that has put forward a policy that harnesses and embraces the multiculturalism and pluralism within our midst. For far too often, we have seen that our holidays are reflective of Western Eurocentric sort of calendar. We don't actually have statutory holidays if you celebrate Diwali or Eid. And my policy, a holiday for all of us, provides a mechanism for us to address the pluralism within our midst in a way that's tangible and actually meaningful.
Okay, time is up. Our last question from Lala for this round.
Okay, candidates, last question from me. It's been a pleasure hearing from you today. So my last question is on funding for Toronto. The federal Liberals have told Mayor Olivia Chow that there's no more money coming, and Premier Doug Ford also did not commit any new funding for the City of Toronto and for the deficit when he met her last Monday. So my question to you is, what is your message for Mayor Olivia Chow, who is coming actually to our Democracy Forum next month? Would you permit a Toronto sales tax or share part of the HST?
Who's starting?
Mr. Naqvi. Yeah. Mr. Naqvi, go ahead.
Oh, thank you very much. And look, our municipalities are in the front lines of providing some of the most basic services that we need. And they have the fewest revenue sources available to them to fund. And this is not a challenge that's unique to Toronto. Toronto, of course, one of the largest cities in our province. You see it more acutely, and because you're sitting here in Toronto, but that's the case in Ottawa. I hear it from my mayor and other municipalities as well across the province. The province have a very important role to engage in a conversation with municipalities, and I've fully committed to doing this. In fact, I was part of a government that uploaded social services costs from municipalities, so they're not the one paying for ODSP and OW, which is a provincially mandated service. Similarly, I'm proposing same thing for development charges. Let's upload that cost at the provincial level so that we can pass on those savings to home buyers, but also work with municipalities to accomplish outcomes for better building of housing, transit, and environment and climate change policies.
Dr. Shamji.
Thank you very much. Let's not mince words. The City of Toronto is hurting because of Doug Ford. Earlier this year, I had the honor of rising in the legislature to oppose Bill 23, the harmful legislation that waived developer charges and predictably is resulting in increases to all of our property taxes. Talk to anyone. It is a very difficult time to be able to live right now. And what we need to be doing is finding ways to put money into people's pockets, not take it away from them. So the first thing that I would do would be to reverse those changes in Bill 23 and make sure that we are not suffering because of Doug Ford's incompetence. Next, I think the really important thing is that this government does not engage in collaborative relationships with anyone. They engage in unilateral action without consultation. It's not for me to say one thing or another. It's not for me to tell Olivia Chow what to do. It's for us to decide together in the best interests of Toronto.
Okay, Ms. Crombie.
So property taxes are perhaps the most regressive form of taxation possible. I really feel for Mayor Chow. Olivia and I have spoken about this issue. It affects all cities, but the city of Toronto most acutely, the largest city in the province. And what we need is a new deal for cities. We've been asked to build 21st century cities with 19th century tools. We have very limited sources of funding. And this is the challenges faced by Toronto today are largely as a result of downloading, whether it's infrastructure, where it's to transit, TTC, it's public infrastructure, the mental health and opioid crisis. So we do need a new deal. We need to talk about opportunities. And the sources of her deficit include largely TTC transit costs. Anyone running a large transit network during COVID lost buckets of money, about $7 million a week, I think, here in Toronto. Infrastructure costs, including the Don Valley and the DVP, and the challenges of homelessness and asylum seekers who come to the city of Toronto first and need our help.
Mr. Erskine-Smith.
First, I want to say that at the federal level, we have delivered an incredible amount of support throughout the pandemic for the City of Toronto. And the City of Toronto is still struggling and continues to need support. Last time I spoke to Mayor Chow, it was around the asylum seeker challenges and homelessness. And again, dollars had to flow from other levels of government, of course. Why? Because the city is ill-equipped to deal with these challenges themselves. For too many years, we've seen these challenges downloaded to municipalities on homelessness, on housing, mental health and addictions. You travel this province, small and large, and the mental health and addiction challenge is real in communities. Municipalities are screaming for help, and the province is failing to show leadership and upload that support and deliver for those municipalities. Now, when it comes to revenue tools, we absolutely do need new revenue tools, but Martin asked around a sales tax. I'm not interested, especially with the cost of living crisis as it is, in imposing new costs on those earning $40,000 a year. Progressive property taxation and empowering municipalities with that, however, the $4 million homeowner in my riding, yeah, they can probably pay a little bit more.
Mr. Hsu.
Well, I'm the only leadership candidate from a small city, so I don't come from around here. But when I drive on the Gardiner Expressway, I didn't realize this until I was living here, becoming an MPP, that the City of Toronto takes care of that. You know what? I'm willing to upload that to the province because I feel like I use it so much. It's right for people from other parts of the province to help pay for that. But when I look at Olivia Chow or Doug Ford saying, oh, we should ask the federal government or the provincial government to help out, what you're really doing is you're asking people from other parts of Ontario and Canada to help out Toronto, which is fine. But if you look at the property tax rates in a place like Kingston, it's about 1.3%, which is about twice as much what it's in Toronto. Property taxes rates have actually been going down in Toronto. So I'd say, yeah, let's get the whole province to help pay for places like the Gardiner Expressway. But you've got to think about the fact that your property tax rates are half what they are in other parts of the province have been going down in the last few years.
Okay, time's up. A word of warning, we're going to report back to Ms. Chow when she comes next month about everything you've just said, and you now have 2 minutes of shared debate.
I have the opportunity, because being a mayor, speaking to mayors around the world. And do you know what some of the European mayors get that we don't? A share of income tax. Now, isn't that a novel idea, that municipalities be properly funded through the income tax system? I'm looking at my colleagues to see if you agree. But there are a suite of tools that could be available, whether it is an RST or a percentage of the HST. I remember when Prime Minister Stephen Harper took 2% off the HST. Wouldn't it have been nice if 1% had gone to cities? But give councils those tool options and let them decide what's right for them. I think all mayors, all municipalities would agree we need access to tools, new revenue tools, but let us decide what will work for our residents. Because at the end of the day, there is only one taxpayer.
That's right, and yet Ted is right at the same time, that we need to make sure that the province is looking across the province at common challenges. Why I emphasize mental health and addictions? That is a common challenge in communities absolutely everywhere. That ought to be a provincial responsibility, and the province has to show leadership. If there's a particular challenge in Toronto that isn't impacting everywhere across this province, and Ted's right, we have had conservative governments here, right-of-center governments here in Toronto, and they have failed to look after finances in a serious way and make the appropriate investments. And so we can't have a provincial government that is constantly benefiting one municipality, regardless of whether Toronto or otherwise, benefiting one municipality over another. It's got to be fair for everyone across this province.
We need a premier who's actually interested in being the premier of all of the province of Ontario, not just being the mayor of Toronto, as we see in Doug Ford every single day. And trust me, the rest of us who come from outside Toronto feel that all the time. You need cooperation, you need respect, you need work with municipalities. It's not a big brother, little sister type of relationship as Doug Ford likes to do. Unilateral actions is not going to take us anywhere. The beautiful thing about our federation, it works really well when all three orders of government work together regardless of political stripe. I'm a team builder, and that's the approach I will bring to municipal relations.
Okay, that's all the time we have for this last segment. We're now going to, we're running a little bit behind. We're going to go quickly to our final segment. I want to thank Lila, by the way, for helping, and looking forward to seeing you. That was good applause. We're looking forward to seeing you behind one of those microphones sometime in the future. Okay, we are getting encouragement here. We are going to do this in alphabetical order, and here's how this segment works. You get to watch the candidates ask the questions of each other while I just goof off over here.
Okay.
You each have 20 seconds to ask your question. This is not question period where you get 60 seconds and 4 supplementaries. You have 20 seconds to ask a short, sharp question to anyone of your choice, who will then have 1 minute to respond. And then the two of you have 40 seconds to debate the topic fast. So to summarize, it's 2 minutes of total, a quick question, a 1 minute answer, and 40 seconds between just the two of you. We're going to start with Bonnie Crombie.
So my question is for Dr. Shamji, and a very happy birthday to you. I get 5 seconds back, please. I know that you share my passion that our healthcare workers are far stretched, overburdened, underpaid, and many of them get frustrated. Some of them have been leaving the profession, leaving their hospitals, and signing up with private agencies. How would you reverse Doug Ford's creeping trend towards privatization and better support our healthcare system and reduce the reliance on private agencies at all?
Thank you for that. The number one thing that I think I've heard many people say on this stage has been that we need to end the appeal on Bill 124. What we've seen is, as that has created a 1% wage cap, an unconstitutional 1% wage cap on public workers, including healthcare workers. They've been driven out of the public system and into temporary for-profit nursing agencies. And this is one of the features of the Ford government, that they adopt policies that are penny-wise and pound-foolish, because those same healthcare workers then come back to those same public hospitals at 3 to 4 times the cost and end up costing all of us that much more. And so, number one, we need to support our healthcare workers. We need to fight privatization. We need to call it out everywhere that we see, because hands up, if the Ford government has said you always pay with your OHIP card, not your credit card, have you ever paid with your credit card for any healthcare services?
There you go.
We all have. And so we need to call it out wherever we've seen it and make sure that money is never the motive when it comes to healthcare.
Okay, your time is up. You have 40 seconds to share. You don't just have to agree. You can debate each other. It's just the two of you, though. 40 seconds.
Okay.
Oh, just two of us? So I like the analogy of the frog in the pot. As you warm up the water, the frog becomes very accustomed to it, just like all of us become accustomed to the fact that when we go to a private clinic, when we go to a clinic for our healthcare needs, maybe we're getting new lenses, cataract lenses, hip replacements, knee replacements, we will have to bring our credit cards as well as our OHIP cards. And this is wrong, and this must be reversed. As Liberals, we believe in universal, single-payer healthcare system, and we must protect it sacredly.
I don't think that we're going to find any disagreement here. We saw, to use the frog in the boiling water analogy, we saw Bill 60 come out this year, which tries to move for-profit private surgeries into, move publicly funded surgeries out of hospitals into private for-profit institutions. I have fought that so vigorously that the number of amendments I submitted to slow that down outnumbered in pages the legislation itself.
Okay, we're out of time. Mr. Erskine-Smith.
Who should I ask a question of? I will go against type, actually. I've got a question for Yasser. I think, as I said at the end of the Thunder Bay debate, that this is obviously about the direction for our party, but it's also about who is best placed to beat Doug Ford. And I said the answer to those questions is actually the same. If we're the progressive, pragmatic, serious, credible alternative, a real progressive alternative to Doug Ford, that's how we can best win. Do you agree?
I do agree, and as I've been saying in this campaign, I think there's two big tasks that our new leader has to undertake, and I'm suggesting I'm the best person to do that. Number one is to transform the Ontario Liberal Party, and by that I mean to build our riding in all 124 communities across this province, in every single riding. We will not be able to present a clear alternative to Doug Ford if we do not have strong riding associations, strong candidates in every single riding, and those voices being represented. Number two, we have to be focused and disciplined in presenting practical liberal solutions to things that really impacting people right now. Those things are, and we've been discussing in today's debate, healthcare. We need to make sure that people have access to family doctors and nurses, that they are not waiting over 20 hours in emergency health rooms, especially in smaller communities. In our education system, where classes are overcrowded, we need to cap those class sizes so our kids can get the best education, and affordability, so our young people are not working 2 or 3 jobs to pay for for their hydros and rents. That's the task ahead of us, and that's how we're going to bring a credible alternative to Doug Ford.
Okay, and you have 40 seconds of shared debate.
So Yasser and I agree that we need a progressive direction, and we'll sell you as to who is best representing that direction and delivering that principled, serious leadership. Are you open to land swaps on the Greenbelt?
Absolutely not. I've been very, very clear from day one. Greenbelt is sacrosanct, hands off Greenbelt. In fact, I will replenish the Greenbelt. I want to go a step further, Nate. I want to create something called an Ontario Farm Belt. I want to protect our precious farmlands in perpetuity so that we can grow good food right here in Ontario.
And at the end of the day, this is about credibility and trust. You need credibility and trust on housing. You need credibility and trust on the Greenbelt. Authenticity, integrity is everything in politics, and I hope you vote accordingly.
All right, Mr. Hsu.
I have a question for Nate. It just seems, Nate, that you've promised the sun and the moon a couple of things. You want to have subsidies for electric vehicles in the showroom when we're already spending billions of dollars subsidizing them in the factories. You want to create a new provincial agency to build housing, kind of like the Metrolinx of building housing. And my question to you is that the best way to spend money? And how are you going to pay for this? Are you going to be raising taxes?
So the incentives that Ted references are actually built on other models around the world which are revenue neutral. So there are other ways that I'm intending to spend money, but that is not one. That one in particular is designed to increase taxes on inefficient fossil fuel vehicles and use that revenue to subsidize electric and clean vehicles. Now, when we think about spending, we have to be fiscally sustainable. We have to have a strong economic agenda. We only deliver lasting social progress if it is built on fiscal sustainability. So when I talk about increasing ODSP, yeah, that has to be costed. We're talking about baseline operational funding for post-secondary institutions, that has to be costed. But if we're talking about housing, if we're talking about capital infrastructure, integrated infrastructure in small and large communities, if we're talking about building non-market housing that lasts for 30+ years, it is absolutely essential that we think differently. Capital infrastructure does not need to be balanced every single year. Operational funding does.
Okay, you have 40 seconds between the two of you.
Well, one of my issues, Nate, with subsidizing electric vehicles in the showroom is you want to balance that by raising taxes on gasoline-powered vehicles. There's a political problem there.
That seems okay.
There's a political problem there because the people who are going to go first to electric vehicles are the wealthy people. The less wealthy people are struggling paycheck to paycheck are going to be the ones sticking with gasoline vehicles. So there's an unfairness there.
But there's a catch-22 in that. We say people who can't afford electric vehicles, well, it's unfair, but then therefore we should make them cheaper so people who otherwise can't
Why
afford
do you
them
have to make
should
it
be
more
able to afford
expensive
them.
for less wealthy people who are going to stick with, who are going to be the last to transition
It's not
to
about
electric
wealth,
vehicles?
it's about what's better for our planet. And inefficient fossil fuel vehicles should cost more.
Okay, Mr. Nakvi.
Well, my question is for Bonnie Crombie, because nobody has asked her question yet. So Bonnie, trust and accountability is going to be the #1 issue in the next election. I'm the only candidate who's put forward a plan to bring public ethics back into provincial politics, to make it more accountable and end corruption. Do you support my plan, and what specific ideas you've got to bring accountability and ethics back into provincial government?
The best way to bring ethics and accountability back to government is change the government. Let's present a new, trustworthy, ethical, accountable, transparent government. I think transparency and accountability are so important. And I think what you're seeing here is such a renewal of our party, of our brand. We are reigniting the brand as we debate, as we go crisscross the province, all of us. I see that spark like I saw in 2015 nationally. Federally across the province. I just want to say that every one of you matters. Every Liberal matters. We need every one of you so that we can all beat Doug Ford and bring back an accountable, transparent government with integrity in 2026. Thank you.
Okay, you have 40 seconds of shared debate.
Well, I don't know, Bonnie, how you can say that you will bring ethics back when your style of politics has a lot of similarities to Doug Ford's when it comes to the donors, the bundling of donors from related family members and executives from same developer companies who are giving money to Doug Ford and giving money to you. Would you return that money back? And how do we expect different result from you than Doug Ford, who's given away our greenbelt to his buddies?
You know what? I'm very proud of my fundraising record. We need a leader who can raise money. And
At any cost?
I'm raising a war chest, and we're going to need a war chest to fund these guys. You know what else matters? Of course not. We all follow the rules to the letter and the law of the rules. Experience matters. Leadership matters. Credibility matters. I have a track record of leadership and experience.
Okay, I'm gonna talk over you. You're not gonna have an audience. Excuse me. Would you please leave? We're here to hear the candidates and not to hear you. So actually, nobody can hear you right now, and we'd be very grateful if you would leave. Thank you. And you're actually not getting an audience. Thank you, and goodbye. And bless you too. All right. So, apologize. Right back. The show must go on. Dr.
Welcome to
Shamji.
politics.
Musical interlude.
Dr. Shamji, you have a question.
Thank you very much. My friend Yasser, I deeply respect your service. I know that one of the policies you proposed has been free tuition for low-income students, and I appreciate the ambition there. What I'm curious to know has been, the Auditor General in 2018 said that the program costs about 25% more and actually didn't increase university and post-secondary uptake by those lowest socioeconomic students that needed that help the most. So I'm curious how you would make sure that your program does deliver that.
Thank you for asking that question. You know, I think it was Bill Davis who said that if you get education right, everything will be all right. And I actually really like that because it is an investment. I don't see money spent on education as on the expense column because the rate of return on that dollar is going to be significant in terms of how we build our economy. Studies after study has shown that young people who come from modest income families, who had parents who never went to post-secondary institution like college or university, single mothers, indigenous children have the lowest participation rates in our post-secondary education. And one of the best ways that we can create an incentive for them to get education is take that cost away from them, especially in this time when cost of living is so high. That's what we need to focus on. That's what I am motivated by, and I think is the right direction for us liberals to take to make college and university education affordable for everyone, regardless of their background.
Okay, you have 40 seconds between the two of you.
And I 100% agree with every single thing that you said. Where I'm going is that program in 2018 was evaluated and did not increase university uptake by those lowest socioeconomic students. I'm just wondering, drawing on that experience, how you would make sure that those First Nations, low-income people actually do get to take advantage of that program this time?
I think that's a very good question, and I think one of the unfortunate things, Adil, that happened is that the program was barely in existence for a year before Doug Ford got rid of it. So we just never got enough data. We just never got enough time to get all that information to indigenous communities, to children in the marginalized communities, because they just never got the chance to apply to school and get in there. I think government has to play a really important role, a robust role, to ensure that everybody knows that such a program exists, that there's no catch to it, that they value, they matter, and their well-being is our well-being.
Mr. Naqvi, you're out of time. I gave you a bit of extra time because it's the last question and because you had your back to the timekeeper, so I was keeping an eye on you from there.
Could have done that trick before.
Mr. Naqvi mentioned, point taken, Mr. Naqvi mentioned a progressive conservative premier in his answer, and I want to just call attention to a former liberal premier who's in the audience today, David Peterson.
Woohoo!
I had to persuade him not to take the podium, and I think he was ready in case any of you faltered, but he stayed in his seat. That's all the time we have today, but at the Democracy Forum, the show must go on. And before I formally thank our guests, I want to just plug our next event. As you may have heard, we'll be hosting Mayor Olivia Chow at our next Democracy Forum on October the 25th.
Great.
So thank you to all the candidates for debating today, and a special thank you to all of you in the audience for sitting through it all, or in some of you standing. Give yourselves and them a round of applause, please. A special thanks to the Provost at Toronto Met, Dr. Roberto Iannacito Provenzano, and also to our President, Dr. Mohamed Lashmi, for his support. A shout out to our host today, the dais at TMU and the team led by Kareem Bardizi and Sam Andre. Thank you also to our media partner, the Toronto Star, and our publisher, Jordan Bitove. So thank you so much. Merci, Megwich. A quick programming note, if you're watching online, I'd invite you to check out another democracy talk that's taking place called Generous Futures, Promoting Democracy, put on by the TMU Alumni Relations Department. Give generously. Thank you. See you next month.